So now I'm going to talk to you about a technique that helps you to identify the areas that we can actually improve to create a better customer experience, and that technique is called customer journey mapping. So customer journey mapping visually illustrates customers' processes, their needs and perceptions throughout an interaction. So once again, remember, we're focusing on perceptions and interactions. Here's a great engineer. I don't know if anyone is familiar with this person. His name is Douglas Dietz, and he works for a company called General Electric Healthcare. Now Douglas, he's actually at the Stanford Institute of Design, and he's there to learn about empathy and customer experience. Shall we take a look at the product that Douglas has actually designed? It's an amazing product. Hopefully most of you are aware of what it is. If I had designed this product, I'd be shouting about it from the rooftops. It's an awesome product. It's an MRI scanner, and it's used to take very detailed images of a human body so that clinicians can work out what's wrong with you. Now, amongst people who actually use the MRI, so these is professionals, this product gets very high net promoter scores. Now, unfortunately, this is not the case with customers that use this product, particularly young ones. A huge 80% of under 10-year-olds require sedation before they will actually have an MRI scan. And so Douglas is following the story of this young girl. Her name is Sophia, and she's 6.5 years of age, and unfortunately she's suffering from severe headaches and blackouts, and she's being told that she needs to have an MRI scan. Now I want you for a minute to imagine how terrifying that must be for a 6.5-year-old girl and her parents. So let's follow this journey and see what happens with Sophia. Now this course that I'm going to do a very quick summary of is very low tech. It just involves using a bunch of different colored post-it stickers and a few felt tip pens and just a board to stick them on. Okay, so it's a very basic course in customer experience journey mapping. And we always start off with a specific customer, a specific person to map. Okay, and in this case we're going to map this journey for Sophia. So we write down all the actions that she goes through, and we write them down on a green colored post-it note. So this starts from her initial doctor's consultation all the way to going to hospital and checking in and actually seeing the MRI machine for the first time. Now I've got a question mark on this slide. Can anyone guess what happens when this girl, who is petrified of this machine, does when she sees that MRI scanner? Okay, so I'll let you spend a minute thinking about that, and I'll tell you what actually happens. She cries and she resists. She's kicking and screaming. She doesn't want to have that MRI scan. So of course, because she desperately needs it, a doctor has to be called, and she's given a sedative, and she's drugged, and she's knocked out, and eventually she goes through and has her MRI. Now this is not a very nice experience for a 6.5-year-old. So let's go through some of the emotions that she might have been going through during this journey, and we write those down on a yellow post-it stickers. So at the beginning, she's questioning, am I even really ill? On the way to the hospital, she's saying, oh my God, I'd rather be in school. She's getting more and more nervous as she gets nearer to the point where she goes into the room where the MRI is, and finally when she sees the MRI, she's petrified. She says, oh my God, is this gonna hurt? And she starts screaming, and she starts looking at her mum for comfort. But instead, her mum actually helps the doctor to give her a sedative. So there's a feeling of betrayal. And overall, this is a very unhappy experience for a young girl who's not well to begin with. So in this technique, one of the things that we do is an on-stage experience. And we write down all of the people that are involved at different stages of interaction. And we write them down on a red post-it note, and we write down all the things that she comes into direct contact with on a blue post-it note. And so I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but just to cherry pick a couple of them. There's obviously the anaesthetist that sedated her. There's the nurse that helped her to go into the MRI room. There's some take-home materials that she received at the very beginning. There's the MRI machine itself. Okay. And then we repeat this process again for people who didn't have direct contact with her. So these are backstage support people and things. And again, I'm not going to go through these in a lot of detail, but I'll just cherry pick a couple of them. There's the technical writer that created the materials, the take-home materials, and there's obviously a patient recording system that logs the actual scan that she had and sends out appointments. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to find that critical moment, that moment that matters. And I'm sure you'll agree, it's when Sophia saw the machine and she cried in resists. So we put a little circle around that. And then if we're actually doing this for real, we would get a little paper clip and a little piece of string and we would dangle it down so everyone can see that critical moment. Okay? Now what we really need to think about is what impact did all of this have? And what we noticed is that imaging times go up, more staff are required, there's all this extra monetary cost with the drugs, and don't forget this is an ill young girl and there could be side effects from the sedative, so the impact is quite enormous. Now what we really need to do is we need to explore which ones of Sophia's needs did we actually meet. Well, she's only got two needs really. The first one is to have the scan, and of course she did have the scan in the end even though she was sedated. And the second need is she needs to feel safe, right? But the need that we didn't meet is that need to feel safe. So Douglas then looked into, well, why wasn't she feeling safe? And one of the reasons was the MRI scanner itself. The other reason was the nurse that actually took her into the MRI room was a little bit stern looking and eventually ended up helping her being injected. And actually those take-home materials that they got right at the beginning of the journey, they didn't really prepare Sophia or her mum to know what was going to happen. So they're the three things that Douglas wants to focus on. Okay? So he goes away and he tries to evaluate and reframe the experience. And what he does, he goes with a clinical psychologist and actually meets with children, young children, and sees what they like and what they don't like. And it seems children like drawing, they like colourful things, and in America in particular, they like going to Camp America. So this is where kids are sent to camp during school holidays. So Douglas and his family go to Camp America to see what is a secret that Camp America used to keep kids happy. So let's take a look at what Douglas actually did to reimagine this experience. Well, the first one they did is they remodeled the uniform that nurses now wear, so it's not so stern and strict looking, and it's much more friendly looking with lots of colourful imagery and hearts and so on. And even the patients themselves now wear quite colourful clothes when they're going to have their scans. Okay, so that's the first thing they did. The second thing that they did is, remember that machine that had an amazing net promoter from the clinical staff? Well, they reimagined that machine and now it looks much more like a great camping experience with lots of colour and so on, a lot less scary for a girl who's only 6.5. Okay, so what did we end up getting? Well, we're getting much better results now because only 5% of kids are now sedated when they have their MRI rather than a whopping 80%. And these better results are that imaging times are down, we need fewer staff, there's no drugs involved, so there's no side effects involved, and the whole process is much quicker and cheaper, so the impact and the results is much better. So these great results came from changing Sophia's behavior towards having the MRI and ultimately changing her attitude to drive those behaviors. And how did we do that? Well, we actually created much better experiences for her to influence that attitude. So the key takeaway here is that customer experience journey mapping helps you identify the critical moment of interaction, and then you can work on creating better experiences to actually produce better results. Okay?